Hello! In this GV Director tutorial, I will introduce you to the control surface and show you how to get started with the basic operational toolset. The video immediately following this one in the series will look at more advanced operations with the control surface. My name is Adrian Shepherd, and in this training I will begin with an introduction to the control surface layout, then take a closer look at the touchpad and the menus for live inputs, transitions, clips and stills, effects, favorites, and a brief mention of the event list menu. Next we'll move on to mapping elements to the keyboard as you would in preparing for a show, and then we'll use the keyboard to cut the show. Finally, we will look at managing the button mapping and setting up and using the stage to first preview items, and then, more importantly, build and rehearse a compound element using a number of different production elements. Let's make a start by introducing you to the control surface. You can see it is broken down into three main areas. At the far end is a transition lever arm, and this is used to manually take items on the stage to air while controlling the transition speed. The touchpad is the central operational area for the surface and can be used to access all types of production elements. And on the left, you see a set of assignable buttons. Here, specific production elements can be assigned via the touchpad to certain buttons for quick access. And this gives you the ability to customize the surface layout for each show. Looking more closely at the touchpad, the first thing to note is that it doesn't come off. It isn't a tablet, although we have obviously borrowed a lot of the tablet look and feel that's become very established and dominant as a standard for touchscreen interfaces. Now, if you recall from the introduction video, we discussed the four principal types of production elements that go to make up a show. And those were live camera feeds, pre-produced media such as clips and stills, transitions such as cuts, dissolves, wipes, etc., and effects such as logos, straps and overlay graphics. As you can see, each of these production element types can be selected from a set of menu buttons along the bottom of the touchpad. You'll notice that as I select each button, the main body of the display changes to show the content available for that menu. You might have spotted that there are two more buttons along the bottom. One, as you might guess from the star icon, is a place to store favorites. The last, on the far left, is the Events List menu. An events list is simply an ordered list of production elements that you can step through one at a time using the Take button. We will look at creating and using event lists in the Advanced Operations tutorial. So if I begin with the live camera feeds, you can see that you can use the touchscreen to interact with the production elements and control which feed is going to air. Note that as a safety precaution, the Take button on the keyboard must be held down at the same time as you tap an icon to prevent accidental taps sending a feed to air. If you look at the program monitor as I select each live input, you will see the new selection Cut to Air. By the way, at the bottom of this menu you can select which of the live inputs are playing out to either of the aux video outputs. The aux video outputs can be used for background video sources only, with no key graphics or transitions. To change the aux output, just tap on one of the aux buttons to make it live, and change the selection like this. Note at the moment there's no tally feedback to show which selection you've made. You would have to look on the aux output to see the changes. Tapping on the keyboard Stage button or the Take button will take the focus off the aux button again. Now, how do I know which transition will be used when changing my live input? Well, at the top of the touchpad, we see the transition type that has been pre-selected. It's currently set to a cut. The transition symbol next to the primary transition here is for a secondary transition, and we'll look at how to configure and use this in the advanced tutorial video. We also have access here to the stage, which is used to rehearse a composition of clips, effects and transitions, and a take button to take the stage to air. The stage is very powerful. It's not just a source preview, and we will look at setting up and using the stage in a few minutes. On the left of the transition icon, there's a meter showing the load on the server. GV Director is not like a traditional switcher using dedicated hardware to process the video. It uses the server CPU and GPU for all the video and audio processing. So, as with any software-based non-linear system, it's impossible to say how many streams and effects are allowed at any one time, especially when you add complex animations and 3D transitions into the mix. This meter provides a visual check as to whether the server is reaching the limit, and I would say that it's always good practice to rehearse any new effects and transitions added to a show production pack before you go to air with them. In reality, you're going to have to add several complex animations and transitions before you see this going anywhere near the red. While we're talking about the controls at the top of the screen, I should mention the pull-down tab here. You swipe your finger down, and that takes you to the control panel. I talk about this in detail in the system setup tutorial, but in case you haven't seen that video yet, here's a brief summary. The top three buttons provide access to further menus and settings. The Record Program button simply allows you to start a recording of your main program output as MPEG-2 format, 50 megabit for HD and 15 megabit a second for SD. These recordings are then available in the clip library. Under the configuration menu, you can save your control surface setup, which includes things like your button layout and favorite items, and load these saved configurations again here. You can access your saved production packs here. Now, it's really important to know about production packs because these contain all the effect and transition information for the system. You can have multiple production packs, allowing you to say have one for each show. A production pack is created using the GV Director Composer application, and this runs on a separate Mac or PC workstation. GV Composer is a graphics compositing application that's applied with the GV Director system, and a set of default production packs will ship with the system to get you started. If I cancel out from here, you can see in the configuration menu we can also recalibrate the lever arm, access the audio mixer, set up the multi-view display, and under Server Configuration, this is where you not only set up the network settings, but you can also select the video standard for the system. If I return to the top level now, and just a brief mention of the File Transfer menu. Here is where you can import and export media files and production packs via the Control Surface USB port to a removable flash drive. Note though that Windows must see the device as a removable device, so some older USB devices may not work. Okay, so back to operating the system now and setting transitions. Another place we can see the selected transition and change the transition type is of course under the transition menu. Here you see the transitions that have been loaded as part of the current production pack, so they will change dependent on what has been authored into the production pack. In this case, we not only have the standard cut, mix and some wipes, but some more complex 3D transitions too. To change the selected transition, the safety mode means we have to hold the Take key down too, to make sure the change is not made by mistake. This still means that at the tap of a finger or two, we can select complex keyframed 3D transitions, like this carousel transition. You see the new selection is reflected at the top of the touchpad too. The other thing to mention here is that we can control the transition duration. It isn't fixed. To make this adjustment, you open up what is called the radial menu. And we do this by tapping twice quickly and hold on the second tap, like this. The radial menu is context sensitive, so the options you see here will change. In this case, you slide your finger out to highlight Transition Properties. You can either enter a duration manually or choose from one of the preset times here. I'll set this to 25, or in other words, 1 second for the current project format. And I click Save, which also exits the radial menu setting and back to my transition menu. Now we will go to our Clips and Stills menu to select a pre-recorded clip. If the server has been powered off, then the Clips and Stills menu will appear empty, only showing placeholders for the clips, as is the case here. Any clips you want to play out must first be preloaded from the server library, making them ready for instantaneous playback. To do this, click on an empty placeholder and then select the clip you want in the library. I'll add a few more clips from my library. You can preload up to 20 clips like this, and you can always change these selections even when on air. This menu is a bit like a Shopbox, with the media being stored on the hard drive in the GV Director server as a small library of media. You can copy media to the server via a flash drive or a USB drive. Every GV Director server is also configured as an FTP server, so you can simply FTP clips across the network directly from your post or pre-production environment, and they will immediately be accessible here. I look at adding media to the system in more detail in the System Setup tutorial. Once you have a clip loaded, you can adjust the start and end timecode and its aspect ratio through Clip Properties in the radial menu. So I tap twice for the radial menu and select Clip Properties. These settings are for live inputs as well as pre-recorded media. So the top item, the Frame Sync option, is greyed out here, as it only applies to live feeds where it could be used to resync a non-sync source. However, the in and out points apply to clips, and they accept timecode values separated by colons. The timecode used is a relative timecode starting at 00 for every clip. So, for example, if you have 1 minute of bars and tone at the front of a clip, you could enter a timecode of 1 minute for the in point. Now I don't know exactly how long the clip is, so I'll just enter 23 hours for the out. GV Director will then play from 1 minute through to the end. The aspect ratio settings can be used when mixing 4:3 and 16:9 media. Stretch is the default setting and will perform an anamorphic stretch to fill the frame. Fit will stretch out but maintain aspect ratio, so this results in either letterbox or pillar box pictures. Fill is probably the least useful option as it performs a pixel-to-pixel mapping, so SD media in an HD project will be centre cut with just a small square in the middle of the frame. So I'll click Save and exit the Clip Properties menu. To remove a clip from your Shopbox, simply hold the Clear button down at the end of the keyboard and tap the clip icon. And there it's gone from your Shopbox placeholder. The clip is of course still in the library and can be reassigned when needed. You can also save your Shopbox selection to recall at a later time. So to save the Shopbox, go to the radial menu and select Save Shopbox. Notice the Load Shopbox selection is in the radial menu too. So if you have a big show, you might want to save a Shopbox configuration of up to 20 clips for each segment of the show. Let's put one of the Shopbox clips to air now. So with the safety mode, I hold the Take button down and tap this clip here, and that'll put it to air using the carousel transition that we set up earlier. So you can see how easy it is to intercut the pre-produced media with my live camera feeds. Moving to the Effects menu next, this is where we can start to add graphical layers to our program output. As with transitions, the effects are authored in Composer and loaded via the selected production pack, so will change depending on the production pack you load. Here you will find things like logos, straps, result slides, tickers, etc. You will notice that we can trigger external devices here too via GPIO connections on the server. To activate an effect on the touchpad, I hold the Take button down and just tap on the icon, such as this Grass Valley logo. I simply tap it again to remove it. This is a toggle on, then off type action. Effects can have more than on and off actions, and we will look more at effect actions as well as effect parameters in the Advanced Operations tutorial. An example of an effect parameter would be the text for a name in a lower third, which can be changed from the touchpad here. Earlier, I mentioned the Favorites menu. Say you have a lot of pre-recorded media and effects in the system and you want to have access to a limited number of elements. Then you can add the ones you need to the Favorites menu. You do this using the same radial menu we introduced earlier. So I tap twice quickly and hold on the element, then slide my finger out to Add Favorites. If we now look at the Favorite menu, we see the GV logo has been added. To remove from Favorites, hold the Clear button down on the keyboard and tap on the production element like this. Your favourites can be saved along with the button assignments in the swipe down control panel when you select to save the configuration option. Let's look next at using the assignable buttons. People often think this looks like program and preset rows of buttons as you would find on a traditional ME-based switcher, but this is not the case at all. It is really just a set of buttons to which you can assign any of the production elements and therefore assign functionality that makes sense for the production that you are doing today. Before we look at mapping our buttons, I should say that there are 4 hard-coded buttons. 2 at the bottom to access the stage and take, and 2 at the far right of the button rows, the Clear button, we have used this already, and a Shift to allow access to multiple levels of button mapping. First, let's look at setting up a simple production, say for example a 4-camera shoot. Click the button to assign and it will start flashing a pale blue. Then click on the touch screen to select the element. I'll repeat this for my first 4 cameras. Notice the OLED display associated with each button now indicates what is mapped to the button. You can then cut between the cameras on the buttons, which is a very familiar interface for someone who has sat in front of a switcher before. However, it is not a cut bus, and you should just think of the buttons as mapped selections, which could be choosing any production element. Next, we can assign some transitions to the top 4 left buttons. I have selected Transitions menu on the touch screen, and I again select the button first, which flashes, then the transition I want to map to it. All production elements are of course still accessible from the touch screen, but some are now also available on the physical buttons. This means these elements are now readily available for frequent use in this production. Next, we can map some effects from the Effect menu on the touchscreen display. I'll map a picture-in-picture effect and then scroll down the effects list to also add a logo, ticker and lower third. Remember that the button layout that we're setting up here can be saved per user in the swipe down control panel when you select to save the configuration. The configuration settings are then saved in the production pack. So if you have a football production pack and a separate rugby production pack, then the settings will go with the production pack, even if you move it between systems. So this is a really useful feature. I look at saving configuration settings and selecting production packs in the System Setup tutorial video. Now I am ready to do the show. You can see from the green button that my primary transition is a cut. Cutting cameras, you can see the program output change. Let's say I now want to do a mix. And this is where we depart from the traditional workflow you would find on an ME-based switcher. I choose Mix on my physical button mapping. This changes my primary transition selection. Then the next live input I select will mix instead of cut. Let's say I want to use something a little more sophisticated as a transition, the cube transition. This is a complicated effect in anyone's system, but in the world of GUI Director, the complexity is obscured by the user interface, and it allows me to focus more on the creative side of the production. So the same principles are used when applying effects. I have a button that says Logo. I press it, and then we see the logo appears on the live output. I'm not thinking about keys or any kind of resources. I'm simply thinking about the end result. I want the logo on the screen. Press the logo button again and the logo goes away. Again, the animation you see here is all authored in the Composer application within its keyframe-based effect editing system. I have another button here for a lower third, and I press it and the lower third appears on screen. Again, all these effects are accessible from the touch screen at any time. I simply map the ones that are most applicable for this show to these buttons. If I want to make changes to my button mapping, perhaps for another show or just to change selection, then I can use the Clear button to clear a mapping. I simply hold the Clear button down and then press the button I want to remove the mapping from, like this Input 4 button here. You can see the lamp has turned off and the green OLED display has cleared too. I can now assign a different production element to this button. Perhaps I want camera 5 here instead of 4. Sometimes the question is asked, what if I run out of buttons? Well, I can use the Shift key to access shift levels for the buttons. Just press the Shift button once to move to another level, and the buttons all behave in exactly the same way, just on another level. Pressing the Shift again will return you to the level we started on. So we haven't talked about the stage yet. This is a very interesting area of the solution. Simply put, the stage can be used in two ways. It can be used to preview clips or live feeds before going to air with them, and it can be used to build a composite number of different production elements together and rehearse the way they look together. First, how do I preview something? I may want to do this if, say, a clip comes in late and you haven't had a chance to look at it, but we're already on air, so I can't punch it in as we were doing earlier. I first have to open up the stage, and I can do this via the touch panel as well as via the button. I then add the clip into the stage by holding down the Stage keyboard button and tapping on the clip icon. It will begin playing back immediately, and I can see it playing back on my stage output view or the multi-view screen. Notice any element selected for the stage will be highlighted in yellow unless they are already live. The keyboard buttons change colour to yellow too. I can then tap on the Take on the touchpad or momentarily press the Take button on the panel to put the clip out to air. The transition lever arm or T-bar also works with the stage to take elements to air and allows you to manually control the transition duration time. By the way, the T-bar will only operate with staged elements. It can't be used anywhere else. So it's a very simple process to preview material. I can preview graphics, clips, or camera feeds if I want to. The second more interesting use of the stage is as a compositing tool. For example, what if I always wanted a certain clip to have a logo associated and use a specific transition, say the 3D cube transition? So let's begin with selecting a straight live feed, camera 1 to program. Now, as before, I'm going to add the clip to the stage. Next, I'm going to the graphics menu to add a logo on the stage. And then I'll go to the transitions menu and I'm going to override the current transition and set it to a cube. What I now have is a number of production elements composited on the stage ready for use. We call this a compound element. I can rehearse the compound element, and when I'm happy with everything on the stage, I can use the Take button to put them all to main program output. Now that is a complicated transition, including in a traditional sense a keyer, a DVE move, and a clip store. But to me as an operator, it's not really important. I'm not thinking about channels of server, and I'm not thinking about where the clip is coming from. I'm simply thinking about the clip itself, the graphic, and the transition, and I let the GV Director intelligence take care of the underlying processes to build the effect. So that brings us to the end of this tutorial. You now know how to set up and produce a show. If you'd like to continue learning more about the GV Director control surface, then watch the next video in this tutorial series, which focuses on advanced operational techniques. More information on GV Director can also be found on the Grass Valley website.